Hello everyone and welcome to Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival 2024. Welcome also to all of those who are joining us on Zoom today, including folks throughout New South Wales who are watching from local libraries. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners of this land, and I pay my respects to their elders and storytellers, past and present. I'm Sophie Groom, the CEO of Writing New South Wales. We're a not-for-profit organisation based in just down the road in Callan Park, Lilyfield, and we provide training, resources and professional development for writers at all stages of their careers. Together with Bad Crime Sydney, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Dixon Room today for this session, Inside Publishing, Different Paths to Publication. First, a few short housekeeping announcements. Please mute your phones and don't record the session. I can't believe, was anyone planning on recording the session? No? Please don't do that. If you're taking photos, please turn off your flash. Feel free to share on social media and tag the festival on Facebook and Instagram at Bad Crime Sydney at Writing New South Wales, or with the hashtag Bad Crime Sydney on X. We will be saving some time for Q&A at the end of the session, so if you have any questions, please save them up until then. Don't forget them. You will have also received a book on your way in, which is very exciting. It's a copy of Matt's new book, and so thank you to Simon Schuster for providing those. Now, onto our fabulous panel. Lisa Kenway is an Australian writer and anaesthetist, and her debut novel, All You Took From Me, was inspired by her long-standing fascination with memory and consciousness. An earlier version of the book was listed for the 2020 Ritual Prize and was runner-up in the 2022 CYA conference competition. Lisa was awarded a Catherine Susanna Pritchard Writers Centre Fellowship for 2023 and was highly commended in the Writing New South Wales Varuna Fellowship the year before. Her work has been published widely in journals and anthologies, including Island, Meanjin, and Meniscus Literary Journal. Matt Rogers was an avid reader as a child, writing his first stories at 6 and his first novel at 16. That was last year, right, Matt? Yeah.
Candace Fox has called me an infant. So.
Yeah. I would have said baby, but infant is okay. Yep.
Either or.
He enrolled in law at Monash University after finishing high school, but left after a semester to write. He published Isolated, his first action thriller, on Amazon's self-publishing service at 18, and has since written over 36 thrillers, selling over 1 million copies. He makes his debut in traditional publishing with Simon & Schuster in March 2025 with The Forsaken, the first instalment in a new series. And Dinuka McKenzie is an Australian writer and the author of the Detective Kate Miles crime series. Tipping Point, the third book of the series, was published earlier this year. She was the winner of the 2020 HarperCollins Australian Banjo Prize. Her writing has been shortlisted for the Sisters in Crime David Awards, the Bad Sydney Crime Danger Awards, longlisted for the Ritual Prize, and highly commended in the Australian Crime Writers Association Louis Award. Her short fiction has appeared in the 2022 Dark Deeds Down Under crime and thriller anthology, and Dinuka lives on Darawal country. Please welcome our panellists. So I thought we could start by asking each of you about how you started out. So a little bit about your first book or series, the book itself, and also to share with us how you came to be published in the first instance. So Lisa, can I start with you?
Yes, so I feel like a little bit of a fraud on this panel because I am 6 weeks into my career as an author. So I don't know, do you call it a career yet? But I have been writing for over 10 years. I'm just slow to get started on the book publishing part. So my novel, All You Took From Me, came out on the 1st of August. It's a psychological thriller set between the Blue Mountains and a fictional Sydney hospital. And it follows the story of Claire Carpenter, an anaesthetist who wakes from a coma to discover that not only has she lost her husband, she's also lost most of her memories from the last few months. And on leaving hospital, she realises there's a stranger following her. She doesn't know who he is or what he wants from her. A little while later, still dealing with memory loss and grieving her husband of 2 years, she gets back to work, where she comes to suspect that an anaesthetic drug might help her access those missing memories. But there's no way to be certain without putting her career and her life at risk. But the threats escalate. Her husband has secrets, and she needs to decide how far she's willing to go to uncover them. This story began at the end of 2017. It took about 2 years to write, and then about 3 years to get a publishing deal, the old-fashioned masochistic way. And it was eventually picked up from slush pile or unsolicited manuscript submissions. I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into now, but...
That's great. Thank you. Matt.
Well, I feel like far more of a fraud because I'm no weeks into publication. My traditional publishing debut is March next year. So I've been reading since I was 4 and writing since I was, I think, 6 or 7, writing fiction. So I had kind of, I guess, like a natural fast track into this industry. And yeah, I wrote my very first novel when I was 16 in year 10 at school. It was like a young adult teen spy thriller that I was into reading at the time. And then, yeah, my first adult thriller was called Isolated, and when I was 18, I wrote that, and I put that up on Kindle Direct Publishing, the Amazon's self-publishing service, just as kind of an experiment. I'd taken a gap year from law, and I thought I'd just write something and put it out and then see what happens, and worst case scenario, I'd go back to uni. And then, yeah, the first one took off, so that's what I've been doing full-time ever since. So it's kind of surreal to like hear how many books I've put out. So I've written 35 novels self-published, so one every 3 or 4 months for the last 9 years. And then, last year I was fortunate enough to, get a deal with Simon Schuster. So my traditional publishing debut is coming out in March, and yeah, it's a whole new journey. It's a whole new side to things, because I'm used to just kind of writing and sitting in a room and that's it. And then now there's this whole community. There's, everyone's been so welcoming. It's been amazing. And yeah, I'm excited for The Forsaken to see how it goes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Dinuka?
Unbelievable. I feel like complete fraud now. I feel like we need to just have this whole conversation with you. So I got into writing completely by accident. That was definitely not the pathway. I did very much what my parents and my upbringing required me to do, which was to get a freaking job, get an education and get a freaking job. And then all the things that come after, which is, partner, house and kids, etc. So really, I fell into writing in that very exhausted, overwhelming space of first motherhood. And when, I had built this career for myself and, it was very much my identity. And then I hit sort of my 2 beautiful kids, which were very much wanted, but then I have to say that because, just to be clear, very much wanted. And yet,
you did also
arrived,
just say then you hit your 2
yes,
beautiful kids.
No, sorry, what?
You said, I hit my 2 beautiful kids.
Did I? Oh, I love my 2 beautiful kids. Clearly this answer's going...
Maybe you said had, and I just misheard.
Oh, right.
Had.
Okay.
Okay.
Had. I had. Anyway, moving on. So I got to that, I got to that space and I felt, okay, I kind of needed something for myself. And that's essentially when I went to sort of... I started writing. I started kind of writing on my laptop and needed a space which was entirely for myself, had nothing to do with my life as a mum and, a consultant and wife and all the rest of it. So, and then what turned up on the page was this woman who is basically processing exactly that. So Kate Miles, the protagonist of my 3 books, is very much in that phase of her life of managing both the successful career and not apologising for that, and and also looking after this family who she very much loves. But obviously, those 2 aspects of your life are, overwhelming and have competing demands, and to try and make a success of those 2 sides, or, whatever that success looks like. So that emotional truth was on the page. But why she was a detective was because I've always read crime fiction. That's my first, reading love. So that was the comfort read that I would always go to. So then that's what turned up on the page. Yeah. Oh, and in terms of publication, it ended up being that first publishing deal was through winning a what's called an unpublished manuscript competition, which was run by Banjo Prize for commercial fiction. That is a very one-line answer to a really, really, really long time period, which we'll go into, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I might ask you some more questions and then we'll come back and tease out each of the stories. So Dinuka, tell us about the Banjo Prize. Was it I finished the next day, here's the Banjo Prize, I'll enter? What was the journey?
No, that was definitely not how that happened. So I was like Lisa, actually, I was writing in 2017. So my second bub was 12 months old at that time. And I kind of said to my husband, look, I really want to do this. And I've been trying to write, in the meantime, had a few chapters down. And so he said, okay, well, how about let's take 12 months off and let's just do this. And so we were very, financially kind of in a place that we were fortunate enough that we were able to do that. So I was like, okay. So I did this thing and I went, okay, I'll give myself that 12 months. So I wrote for, I think it took about 7 or 8 months. I can't quite remember how long it took to put that first draft. But essentially I was a stay-at-home mum looking after the kids, and during the weekends, in theory, my husband took the kids. He tried to, and he's the most amazing husband. However, I had the most attached child in the entire world. And she was like, no, I'm sitting right there, and you were right, I sit next to you. And that's what she did. And so I would write on my laptop while watching The Wiggles, yes. And I think that was because during the week I was doing all the manual sort of nappies and whatever. And so clearly that story was building in my head. And then so when I got to the weekend, it was just there to just get out. And so it came out like that. And then after that, obviously I was like who the hell was I to write a novel? It was turning up one day and going, I have decided to be a magician today. Great. Now what the fuck do I do? Seriously. So then I was like, oh, now what do I do? I knew no one in the writing community and had this manuscript. So I ended up sending it out to a external manuscript assessor, who absolutely ripped it to shreds and went, this is not a crime novel. And I had to, so that was really helpful because I had got to the end of my knowledge of how to do this. And it kind of went on from there. So it took a number of years. I was very lucky to win a couple of mentorships. And then, one with a firm press, and I thought, oh yes, I've done it. Look, I've attracted a publisher. That means it's done. 2 rounds of edits with them. They passed on it, and I was and that was a year of my life. And I was oh God,
That's
an
gotta be
absolute okay, well here goes all of my, tiny bit of confidence that I've built up. But they were amazing. They were essentially my apprenticeship to how to write a novel. And that, I had a lot of luck with a lot of incredible established writers who took the time to give me their expertise. One of them was Emma Viskich, who read my manuscript, gave me feedback. Anyway, sorry, this is a very long story. But anyway, that's the version, the version that Emma helped me out with. And this was a Twitter call out, as you do in the days when Twitter was good. She did a Twitter call out saying, hey, I will give feedback for 3 chapters. And I went, yes, please. And I submitted my manuscript and she chose me. And she then proceeded to read my entire manuscript and gave me comments again, complete generosity of the writing community. that version was the version which, like, I worked on it because she gave me a whole lot of feedback, worked on it, completely changed the first chapter. That version was the thing that I submitted to this thing called the Banjo Prize. Absolute midst of COVID 2020, I get a phone call saying, oh, you've shortlisted for the Banjo Prize. And then in the meantime, I had been absolutely submitting, including to agents. When that Twitter thing, when HarperCollins put that tweet up, I got an email going, oh, like, I know you. You've just, and so I had then 2 agents come to me with contracts. And then the weekend after, my second novel had got longlisted for The Ritual with Lisa. And then by the end of that second week, I got another phone call saying I'd won the Banjo Prize. So in 2 weeks, I went from literally nothing to like every single one of my dreams had come true, and I was suddenly like a published, had this publishing deal. So, but I know we're going to get into what that meant, like, and how that felt like later. But yeah, that was the story.
Yeah, and so just the sequence. So you got published, like the prize of what you win from the Banjo is publication of your book, right? But you already had a second book, so there was no...
So I was writing a second book at that point, and the Ritual Prize is you don't have to actually have a full manuscript for that particular mentorship award. So you can submit, I think it's the first 15,000 from memory, with an outline of the rest. So that's why. So I had that going, because obviously, the advice to new writers is always while you're submitting, you're writing the other thing. And so I then got an agent before the win, and then by the time it came out in 2022, I had written the second one, and then we pitched that to the publisher. We submitted that to the publisher with the pitch for a third, and so I got a separate 2-book deal for the second and third books, but the first book was published through the Banjo win, Yeah,
great. Okay. Matt?
Yes.
Coming to you, I want to ask about the move to traditional publishing, because it's fascinating. But before, can you just tell us a little bit about publishing with KDP?
Yeah.
Was it really hard? What was your experience? Do you have to be a massive tech head to be able to do it? What could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's... So I think I first got put onto it because this young adult novel that I wrote when I was 16, I sent it to every agent in Australia because I'd heard that the guy who published Eragon was 16 when he started that fantasy series. So I was like, that's my, that's my overarching goal. And then, got about 50 rejections, I was 16 years old. That's par for the course. I was a terrible writer. But that is what turned me on to other avenues in the first place. So I think, I've, it's surreal for me being, 26 up here, but it's like I've sort of had this entire 12, 14-year journey just very, very early. I was 18 and I'd heard about Kindle Direct Publishing, and there was a Reddit, a subreddit called Self-Publishing, which was just a bunch of self-published authors who had learned a lot about, what goes into it and what it involves and how much the author actually has to do. So I just perused that day after day. I was already sort of 1 foot out the door with my law degree. So I think I was, pretty set on let's take a year and do everything possible to see if this will work. And then, so I put my first self-published novel out when I was, 18, just about to turn 19, in 2016. And, it was interesting because I did all of the things that were basically recommended to me. I messaged as many self-published authors as I could and said, hey, what kind of goes into it? And there's not... At that time, there wasn't that much to it. It was more like, you get a cover commissioned, you write your own blurb, which I was fine with because I sort of love that. I love kind of shaping the entire way the book is presented anyway. So I guess I always kind of had creative and entrepreneurial, I kind of had a foot in each thing. I just loved the entire every part of the process. So yeah, it was a family friend who did the very first cover for me, because he had some Photoshop experience, and he said, yeah, I'd love to give it a crack if you're willing to take the risk on me. And I said, well, yeah, dude, I've got about $200. Like that's the most I can. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And now he's one of the top self-published thriller cover creators on Amazon.
Amazing, because it's the same person, right, who's done all of your books? Is that right?
Except for this one. But yeah, he's done all of my self-published works. Yeah. And yeah, he's actually not like family friend in terms of relations, but he and I used to work for my mum at Dandenong Market. And he had a bookstall at Dandenong Market. So I think he was kind of tapped into what covers people just were naturally inclined to pick up and what they kind of passed on by. But yeah, he's incredible. So I kind of fluked that with having a sort of good cover for the genre. I was 18, I didn't have any money. So yeah, got a really good cover. I think I understood kind of the tropes of the genre and what draws people to a thriller in the first place, because we'll go into this later with like the benefits and pitfalls of each of these paths. But one of the pitfalls of, I guess, the way I did it is that, there's stuff that I wrote when I was 18 that's out there in the world, and I feel like I honestly think it's terrible, the stuff that I wrote in the first couple of years. But that's, I guess, the natural evolution of, I think, so many authors look back at their first book that was sort of put out there and go, oh, I'm so much better than that now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've really appreciated it, actually, just to be able to see, as my books were released, the kind of evolution of my writing, which I'm really, really glad that this is the point where I kind of make the leap into traditional publishing, because The Forsaken, that most of you have a copy of, I wrote the first chapter of that 4 years ago, just as a creative exercise. So it was the very first time that I hadn't written something for work in like 6 years, because it kind of became my whole life when the first self-published book took off, because I realised, oh, this is a huge opportunity that it's very, very rare that I've kind of stumbled onto this. So I didn't want to take it for granted. So hence the 35 books in 8 years. But yeah, I just kind of came up with a system for, I'll plan a book for this long, I'll do this many words per day. I just kind of approached it in the way of like, everyone else has to show up for work. This is now my job. I just tried not to kind of put myself on a pedestal as if I was some prodigy for, taking off really. I just thought, no, I just want to practice and practice and practice and get better and better. Because, I think I was good for an 18-year-old writer, but at the end of the day, I was still an 18-year-old writer. Like, you need the world experience, you need repetition, you need practice, no matter how talented the writing might seem. I've always kind of stayed focused on that. So I guess the goal was to jump to traditional from the very beginning. Oh, wow. But I just knew I wasn't ready, and I just wanted to kind of wait for the thing that I would be most proud of, and wanting to sort of, take it to now this kind of, I guess, level, because I've had the sales, but I just haven't had any other experience in the publishing industry. So yeah, I wrote the first chapter of The Forsaken 4 years ago, and I thought that I don't want to turn that into a book that I'll self-publish. I want to sit on that, and when I find the time, I want to flesh out that book and send it to an agent. And I did that last year. Dan Pilkington, he's in the room, and yeah, he was obsessed with it, and we kind of went from there. And he got a deal with Simon Schuster, so March it's out. So there you go. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So Lisa, I guess you've kind of in some ways trodden the most kind of traditional path to publishing of the three of you, and I know that you did a fair bit of pitching to publishers. Do you want to talk us through that? And I know you've written a lovely blog about manifesting a book deal, but how that actually kind of came to happen.
Yes. All right, I'm going to start by saying that I'm quite possibly the least woo person in the room, just in case you're making judgments.
We're all a little bit.
Well, you know, I'm a science nerd doctor, so, you know, least woo person. Yes, I just took the pathway that you meant to take, in that I started by looking for an agent, pitched. There weren't that many agents who were open for submissions when I was looking, but I did send my work out to the ones that were, and I looked for opportunities to pitch the other ones through pitching opportunities. There's lots of conferences, ASA, Allen & Unwin, Faber Academy. There's all sorts of ways that you can access agents and publishers if you have a manuscript that you're trying to find a home for. So I started with pitching to agents. Unfortunately, there was no interest, but I did get some very useful feedback in the process. So if you get a personalised rejection with constructive feedback from a person in the publishing industry, that is gold, and you want to pay attention to it. It may not necessarily chime with you, but I changed the manuscript over that period of time in response to the feedback. And then once I'd exhausted the agents that I was interested in submitting to, I started on publishers. And during this time I was entering unpublished manuscript competitions as well. And that's when Dinuka and I managed to get listed for the same prize in 2020, which was lovely. Anyway, so I think quite possibly 2020 wasn't the best time to start pitching a dark thriller largely set in hospitals. Sometimes the timing isn't quite right for the work that you're putting out there. So I got close with some of those pitches. I did a few ASA literary speed dating. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. It used to be in person and now it's on Zoom. You get 3 minutes to pitch your work to an agent or publisher. And I did that with a few publishers, got quite a few full manuscript requests. One of the commissioning editors liked it so much, she had another Zoom meeting with me, gave me a developmental edit basically, and asked me to edit the manuscript and send it back. And a little bit like Dinuka's heartbreaking story, after a few months of deliberation and the whole team reading it, it didn't make it through acquisition. So I was back to square one, but with a better manuscript for that work that I'd put in. And I just kept going. Sending it out. Eventually got to the point where I got to slush pile submissions. So I know we're not supposed to call it slush pile, but it is slush pile. It's unsolicited submissions, is where if a publisher's open, you email the manuscript to them and it goes into the void somewhere and you hope that somebody opens it and reads it. So I tried to avoid that because common wisdom is that the success rate is very low. But I did get to that point where there was no other way to access the rest of the publishers that I hadn't approached. And I had almost exhausted all the publishers I thought would be interested in my manuscript at the probably just about 3-year point. And I had been working on another manuscript, the one that got me fellowships and so on, and I had decided to put my energy into that and accept that All You Took From Me might never become a traditionally published book. And at that point, I got my yes. Funnily enough.
So, Lisa, you're part of a group, you put together a group called the Debut Crew, a group of writers. Everyone has written at least one book, I take it, in that group?
That's the entry requirement.
That's the entry requirement? Okay, good. Matt, you can have your own special group with 36 books being the entry requirement.
It's just me on my own in the corner.
Yeah. Small group. And you guys recently did some research in the group, which I found fascinating, about, like how people came to publication, how long it took, how many books were in the initial deal, all of that kind of thing, which I think is information that it's so valuable to know. One of the things I found really interesting was actually that I thought a fairly high proportion of the writers were agented. I think it was about 40%. Was that surprising to you?
Well, I'm not sure if it was surprising because I know a lot of the writers in the group and I know enough of them to know the various different ways that people have come to get a publishing deal. And there seems like we have over 80 people in our debut crew. Some are more active than others, and they range from picture book writers through to poets and graphic novelists and adult fiction writers and memoirists. So their pathways are all very different. I think I was surprised by the number of people that didn't have agents, and I suspect it would be a higher percentage of that because a lot of the people that didn't answer the survey were the children's authors, and they find it hard to get agents. So yes, I'd say the majority did not have agents. Mm-hmm. And the majority, by a slim majority, got their deals through unsolicited submissions like me.
Yeah. On the topic of agents, Matt, you can say lots of positive things since Dan is in the room.
I can't. He's got a gun trained on me from...
Can you tell me a little bit about the role that an agent has played in your journey?
Yeah, well, for me, it's been integral. Maybe because I write, I was going to say conventional thrillers, but this is quite different to, this is more of like a philosophical, the way I pitched this book, The Forsaken, is, if anyone's seen the first season of True Detective with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, so it's kind of like the heavy philosophy of that wrapped up in an action thriller plot, so the action kind of just serves to send the underlying message that I'm trying to, and that was what I stumbled on. I guess that's kind of like my own now unique voice in the thriller space, or that I stumbled on that maybe 3 years ago, and I think that is why I'm so grateful for, in hindsight, for the amount of experience that I kind of got in such a short amount of time, because I saw myself moving from, I guess, when I was 18, first starting out, you imitate what you think is best in what you love in the thriller space. So I went from these kind of conventional Jack Reacher style thrillers where, ex-special forces guy drifts into a town and you've seen it a million times. And I guess that was where I found my footing. And then I've always been obsessed with philosophy and that, not esoteric, but, the kind of the why we make the choices we make. And then I guess that kind of is just the core of all storytelling. And I realised that I could bring that. What was your question? Sorry, that's nothing to do with.
It was about having an agent. This is fascinating. Like, don't
I just caught myself. I was
nothing to do with what I asked, but we love it.
I just went off on a tangent.
About having an agent and how that kind of influenced where you went and how you got
absolutely
there.
Nothing to do with what I was just talking about. Agent's been integral. How did I even get to that point? Oh yeah, so because I think just the agent, at least Dan, the agent that I had, when it's so competitive nowadays in the traditional publishing industry, I think if an agent goes for your book, they are genuinely passionate about it. And I've seen that. Like I've seen this whole new side to just all of publishing. Like I guess because I always had the sales, but it was really just numbers on a screen. And it was surreal and it was great, but at the same time I was kind of just writing a book, publishing it, writing a book, publishing it, and I'm fortunate enough to have sold 1 million copies across all of those books. But it's like that's the first time I've ever signed anything for anyone. Just then. So yeah, it's like there's this whole other world to it that Dan's just been kind of relentless with. Getting the Simon Schuster deal in the first place. That ended up being a 3-book deal, which was kind of took me completely by surprise. And yeah, just someone to vouch for you, because I've just done it solo for so long. And I guess there's this kind of imposter syndrome element to like vouching for yourself. So I think that's an amazing part of it, is that I wasn't super comfortable with cold emailing agents and publishers and, oh, hey, I've sold 1 million copies, please pay attention to me. But if there's someone who really believes in your book deeply just for the prose itself and the amount of effort that I've sort of spent 3 years just obsessing over every word of The Forsaken. And Dan saw that, and yeah, he just went with it. And yeah, I've never experienced anything like it, so it's still surreal.
Great. Dinuka, what do you think are the benefits and the pitfalls, as we've said, of the way that you got into publishing, so through winning a competition?
Certainly I can only speak for myself, but I guess with the benefits, I think, of, unpublished manuscript competitions in general are, you have some certainty that it's being read. So that was we talked about this, this idea of the slush pile where, you have no certainty that it's going to get read. And if so, in what time frame, whereas I guess a competition, the entry date, and at this date they will announce the shortlist or the winners or whatever it is. And even not making it onto the shortlist or long list or whatever, that is still an answer, because that is telling you that industry people have read your manuscript and have made a decision that it's not close enough, and that is still a decision. That's still an answer. And in many of these, I've heard stories where, for the Banjo, people have not made the shortlist, but they've the editors have been so interested in a particular manuscript that they've called the author and gone, hey, you didn't quite make the shortlist, but we were really interested in this. Here's some comments, or here's some things. In other competitions I've heard of where judges, again, it hasn't made the sort of the final list, but judges have been so kind of interested in that particular manuscript that they've gone, hey, is it okay to email that author and give them some encouragement? Because again, people are reacting to your work, and in that way, you have a definite answer within an actual period of time. Rather than a submissions pile where you're well, do I wait 3 months? Do I wait 6 months? Do I wait a year? I don't know. You don't know. You literally don't know. So I would say that was one of the reasons that I was submitting. But it's also, and I think, and Lisa, I know, does this as well, but this idea of submitting your work, to query your work, that is part of the game. If you are actually serious about sort of writing, and having a career in publishing, and there's many, many reasons to write, so I'm just purely speaking from that particular place. But if you want that thing, you have to be willing to put your work out there, and have kind of almost like a rejection goal for yourself, because that means you're actually putting your work out there. So I would say that was part of it as well, because I had the Excel spreadsheet which had all the agents who had their submissions open, all the competitions that were available for that year. This was certainly not the only unpublished manuscript that I submitted to. Whatever was, accepting crime, whatever mentorships were open, I was submitting. And each time, if I was lucky enough to get feedback, I would incorporate it. And the manuscript, therefore, got worked on. So I would say that is the benefits of that. I guess, I was absolutely, again, in the place of Lisa, where I had assumed that this was not going to get published, because I had sent it out to everybody I thought would be interested, and I hadn't got any takers. So this, in my head, was very much my going to be in the bottom drawer kind of book. So therefore, when it